Matiangi or Kalonzo? That is the question. As the political temperatures rise and continue to rise, as we dash towards 2027, because that's what we've decided as a people, we are in science fiction, where you can go back in time and forward. So Kenyans have decided in the political fiction of the country that 2027 is 4 weeks away. So we must now look at the opposition. Today, I begin a series of conversations around the political figures, beginning with the opposition. Whether or not the opposition can unseat President William Ruto will greatly depend on the man or woman, a united opposition, if there's going to be a united opposition, puts forward to face the smart, workaholic, intelligent, ever-scheming President William Ruto. So today, we begin by looking at the pair of Matiangi and Kalonzo. It will become clear as we go on with this conversation. First, why I'm pairing them. Secondly, why they come first. Next, I'll look at Gachagua and Uhuru Kenyatta in the matrix of the country's politics, especially Mount Kenya politics. It will be important to understand the power Uhuru Kenyatta holds vis-a-vis Gachagua's influence on the mountain. And more critically, what will become of opposition politics in the country in general, and in particular Mount Kenya, were Uhuru Kenyatta and Rigathi Gachagua to go separate ways. Who holds the sway? That will be important to Kenyans. I'll proceed to look at Eugene Wamalwa and Natembeya because, for example, if Kalonzo is chosen as the presidential candidate and the choice of running mate is made for him in more or less the same way it was made for Raila Odinga, by way of limiting what region Raila would choose from, in this case Mount Kenya, supposing for Kalonzo Musyoka, he's limited to Western Kenya, Western Province, the Mlembe Nation. Will he go for his colleagues, his co-principal, Eugene Wamalwa? Or will he go for the new chap who is shaking the ground, the man who has floored all political giants in the Mlembe Nation, George Natembeya? It'll be interesting to see. Next, I'll look at individual politicians and their strength, beginning with Gachagua, to see whether he is as tough as he presents himself, or whether he's just another bubble. As we go on with this conversation, I will invite these political leaders to come on our platform, to get the platform to talk to Kenyans, to get the benefit of the numbers of the many Kenyans who watch us, both directly and indirectly, locally and in the diaspora. Kenyans in their millions every month who tune in to our channel, directly or indirectly. We'll be inviting the politicians to come and make their case to the voters of this country. So today, we start by looking at Matiangi and Kalonzo. As of today, any observer of the Kenyan political scene, especially the opposition side, will agree that the entry of Matiangi has caused ripples. Look no further than his entry in Wamnyoro. Matiangi's entry in Wamnyoro in Nyeri County at Gachagua's home left no doubt in the mind of all observers that he was emerging as first among equals in the opposition. That he seems to be now the indisputable flag bearer. He overshadows the rest, including seasoned politicians like Kalonzo Musyoka. Kalonzo is also not a pushover. So let's look at these two. Will the opposition take Kalonzo Musyoka? What are the strengths and weaknesses of Kalonzo Musyoka vis-a-vis Matiangi? The very obvious to flag out about Kalonzo are his weaknesses. He's been seen as a fence-sitter in the manner of the late Mwai Kibaki, a man who never saw a fence he did not want to sit on. And in this kind of view, he will be in the good company of one Wycliffe Mudavadi. Similarly, it has been said, Kalonzo Musyoka is a man without a stand. He acknowledges the chameleon tag. Kenyans are very good with names. He acknowledges the watermelon. And the question that must be asked is, if Kalonzo Musyoka becomes the opposition flag bearer, will William Samoei Ruto eat him as dessert, fruit salad? Will the watermelon be part of the fruit salad being enjoyed by William Samoei Ruto during breakfast on the voting day in 2027 August, or according to Willis Otieno in 2026 August? Something else that is clear about Kalonzo Musyoka, which comes in as a weakness, or as a disadvantage. He's not forceful. He doesn't punch. Kenyan politics like men and women who punch. People who throw hard punches like William Ruto, Raila Odinga, Rigathi Gachagua, Martha Karua. People who punch without gloves. In that field of boxing, Kalonzo Musyoka is a minion. Finally, does Kalonzo Musyoka have friends and sufficient networks, both locally and internationally? The answer is certainly no. Friends, networks, both within the country and outside the country, very critical. It explains why William Samoei Ruto had sort of abruptly, urgently, to begin moving overseas to look for friends, critical allies and friends, without who a presidential bid will go nowhere. That is the terrain enjoyed by Raila Odinga and William Ruto now. Does Kalonzo have that? Similarly, does Kalonzo have the resources? Again, the answer doesn't seem to be yes. It looks rather obvious that Kalonzo doesn't have resources. This election, particularly, is going to be about huge spending. It's unfortunate for the country. Indeed, I foresee a situation where there's going to be serious inflation in this country after the general election of 2027. I can see huge spending. This would have been the case in 2022, and I'm sure President William Ruto was prepared for it, except that the Azimio side of Raila Odinga ended up not releasing money, not spending money. And I think Uhuru Kenyatta did not give as much money as people had thought he would, and for which I'm sure William Ruto was prepared. So that meant then William Ruto didn't find it necessary to spend his money. Otherwise, we were going to pay for it. We would still be trying to get out of that inflation. 2027, unfortunately, very unfortunately for this country, is going to be a year of unprecedented spending. I can see billions of money flying around. Kalonzo Musyoka will disappear in the cloud of money that will be flying around. Something else about money. It is not just the absolute figures you have. Because somebody would argue, if Kalonzo becomes a flag bearer, then people will give him money. I've said that before, that people can give you money. But you have the culture of spending. Can you spend money for politics like Daniel Arap Moi did? Would you know how to put resources to good use the way William Samoei Ruto would, I suspect, do? So it's one thing even for Kalonzo to have money. It's quite an entirely different thing for Kalonzo to have the capacity and the wherewithal to spend that money. It's a culture. It devolves over time. I'll talk about this when I come to Rigathi Gachagua next week. Fred Matiangi, on the same score, comes out a little more stronger than Kalonzo Musyoka. He's forceful, in fact a bulldozer. Some fear he may be a dictator, but he's forceful. Quite the opposite of Kalonzo Musyoka. He doesn't fear to make decisions. He makes tough decisions. We saw that when he was minister. Some of the decisions quite unpopular. He faced parliament when they were grilling him. He begins to grill them himself. Matiangi makes decisions. Some of them very unpopular, but he makes them. He's tough. In fact, somebody would say, kind of panga it was, I think, tough as steel. That's Matiangi for you. Now, put Matiangi here, put Kalonzo here, in terms of that. On that measure alone, Matiangi comes out strong. And that's why people are looking for Matiangi. Why? Because they want a no-nonsense person. They want somebody who will not allow his election to be stolen. Now again, look at Kalonzo, look at Matiangi. In terms of friends, I think Matiangi, because of his closeness with Uhuru Kenyatta and being the powerful minister he was, I think he has more friends, both local and international, including his current engagement with the World Bank and his station in Washington, D.C. If you have your eyes on the presidency and you are operating from Washington, D.C., the seat of world power, you can only be a fool if you didn't make friends. So in terms of friends and networking, both locally and internationally, I think Matiangi is way ahead of Kalonzo Musyoka. In terms of resources, I think, again, Matiangi will do much better than Kalonzo. I don't have the facts, I don't have the figures, it's just a feeling I have. But his close association with Uhuru Kenyatta and being the Jubilee candidate and with the rumored working with Uhuru Kenyatta means therefore resources for Matiangi will not be a big issue as compared to Kalonzo Musyoka. And now to the strength of each candidate. Kalonzo Musyoka obviously comes top when it comes to what people feel is fairness. If we are to play a gentleman's game, many people feel it's only fair that Kalonzo Musyoka becomes the flag bearer. He's made sacrifices. He's sacrificed for Raila Odinga and by extension for this country. That, for example, if Raila were to be the one to pronounce, because you can't be sure that Raila will stay with Ruto up to the end. Supposing Raila leaves Ruto and comes back to the opposition, and he himself is not running, and is asked or faced with the challenge of helping the opposition pick a flag bearer, Raila will come out looking extremely bad if he were to look beyond Kalonzo Musyoka. People will think he's not a human being. And many people feel that. And therefore, that's Kalonzo's biggest strength. That in terms of fairness, it is Kalonzo's turn to be supported. Another strength that Kalonzo brings on the table is that Gema has been expanded or re-expanded to include Kamba. So Gikuyu, Ebu, Meru, and Akamba. And if this bond is going to work, then Kalonzo comes out stronger than Matiangi in terms of the initial numbers you put on the table. If Kalonzo puts the numbers on the table and that his initial base home numbers include Mount Kenya, then he's a man to beat for the presidential ticket, and in fact for the president itself. He would be a very competitive candidate. The same way, it's been assumed, maybe wrongly, that Gachagua will certainly support Kalonzo. Look at the support Kalonzo extended to him during the impeachment. And he recently talked about it when the opposition chiefs visited his home in Wamnyoro. And I think it's also on another function somewhere, I can't remember where. So yes, Kalonzo comes out very strong in terms of the support that he almost automatically attracts. Another thing about Kalonzo is that if you were to choose between Eugene Wamalwa, Natembeya, Matiangi, Marara Kebaso, and the rest of these people, you could include Jimmy Wanjigi if you wish. Surely, by age and experience and the years of service to this country, it will be more or less automatic that Kalonzo is the candidate. You can compare this to what happened in 2002, when between initially Ngilu, Wamalwa, and Kibaki, it was Kibaki. There's no doubt about it. By dint of age and experience. And even when the opposition came together, much as we want to say, oh, Nyachae was there, oh, others were there, really, by Raila saying Tosha, he was just perhaps doing the obvious, that Kibaki was head and shoulders, as they say, above the rest, had been there longer than the rest, had more experience, had occupied more critical dockets than the rest, had been an MP for the longest time. He had the experience, he had the edge behind him. Same with Kalonzo. He's been vice president, full term. Not like Mudavadi's 2 weeks or so. Minister. organizing secretary for KANU, the only party then for many years. Not just minister of powerful dockets, foreign affairs, and so on and so forth. So on that score, Kalonzo comes out that if these guys were to sit in a room, just like we saw in Rome, the Vatican recently, get locked in a room until we see some smoke. I had the idea of black smoke. We must change that. That symbol doesn't seem to sit well with me. But if they were locked in a room and they looked at each other, how will they not conclude that by dint of experience and age, Kalonzo should be the candidate? Those are the facts. And on that score, he beats Matiangi. That's the complication there is. So Matiangi House has to bring to bear his other advantages to be able to override those considerations of Kalonzo's experience and age. And it'll be very interesting to watch. When that time comes, what would happen? And we can't end this conversation without asking ourselves, will it be enough just to consider those strengths and weaknesses? The answer is certainly no. There are other factors. For example, if you chose Kalonzo, who will be the running mate? If Matiangi, who appears to be top, other than issues of experience and age, he certainly is way ahead of the rest. If he will only compromise if he became running mate. Say, okay, Kalonzo, you are my father and you are my elder brother. Okay, in the interest of this country, I'll support you. Would it not be true that only one slot will be fit for Matiangi thereafter? Running mate. And what is the complication there? Where do you leave the Luya? If you pair Kalonzo and Matiangi, where do you leave the Luya? It's not easy. Because if you go in that manner, then Ruto will invade the Mlembe nation. And I can assure you, Ruto will very quickly make Mudavadi the running mate. And he will run away with 85% of the Western vote. Which will be critical because it will affect the opposition very negatively. How about if you took Matiangi? Again, you face the challenge of Matiangi cannot be paired with Natembeya or Eugene, because then both of them will be coming from Western Kenya. You can't have somebody from Kisii here walk a few kilometers and pick a running mate. I know Raila did it in 2007 with Mudavadi, but in the current matrix, even within the understanding of our politics and our constitution today, that is a complication. So these things are not as easy. Because in the selection of a running mate, even if Mount Kenya were to say, Kalonzo represents us, so we are not interested if it's Kalonzo. But if it's Matiangi, they will say they need running mate. Where are the Luyas? It is very, very complex, extremely complex. Because if you give Matiangi, will Kalonzo accept to be his running mate? Just looking at age. If, on the other hand, we decide, okay, Matiangi is a worker, let Kalonzo go, deputized by Eugene or Natembeya. You've taken care of the Luyas and the game and all that kind of. So that Matiangi then becomes, because he's a worker, he becomes this prime something, which was not worked out well. I was doing some work for NASA, trying to figure out, to craft how to take care of Mudavadi. When Raila was going to run with Kalonzo, how are you going to take care of Mudavadi? A friend of mine, the late Nanjakululu, and I were crafting that, cracking And we did it. Only that they didn't win. And perhaps they would not even have appreciated what we did. If you now want Matiangi to be promised the prime something, look at how it has been weakened. Mudavadi has made that position look so useless that you cannot, in sharing positions, tell a community or a person that we utakuwa prime something. He Mudavadi, he. Somebody will tell you, please, you are joking too much. So it is complex. And in selecting between the two foremost opposition candidates, the math of bringing communities to work together through their sons and daughters will be very complicated. It will complicate an already complicated situation, making it worse just by trying to figure out who becomes the presidential candidate, the running mate, and so on and so forth. I wish the opposition the best.